Hello and welcome to the box office, your one stop for box office numbers, news, and analysis. I'm Chris Mims.
And I'm George Montoya. Welcome once again, as this is the first episode of the box office. And wouldn't you know it? There's no box office.
But there might be soon, sooner than any of us could have imagined, hoped, or wanted. And that's what we're here to talk about. Now, unless you've been living out in space,
honestly, the people we've sent out into space already know about this.
You've undoubtedly heard about the global pandemic that is COVID-19. And even if you don't think it's real or serious, it more than likely has seriously affected your favorite restaurant, sporting venue, or yes, your barbershop. And absolutely, it has affected movie theaters. And with theater chains around the world closing their doors due to the pandemic, for the first time ever, the global box office has come to a virtual standstill.
So back in mid-March, chains such as Cinemark, Regal, and AMC all closed their doors following government mandates and the worst box office weekend in 2 decades. The weekend of March 13th and 17th yielded a domestic box office of 55.3 million, which is insane to think about with movies these days encroaching on $500 million in earnings single-handedly. However, the pandemic-influenced box office numbers were still slightly higher than the faithful box office on September 15th to the 17th in 2000, with the releases of The Watcher, Bait, and Bring It On, making a collective 54.5 million. I've only seen one of those films.
I haven't seen like any of those movies.
which is a shame.
The only one I've is Bring It On,
which is pretty good.
Yeah, and that's why it ain't beating pandemic box office numbers. Now, where were you when you saw Onward, if you saw it at all? Because chances are you weren't in a theater when you did. Disney's Onward was one of the last big budget films to not have its scheduled theatrical release pushed, and after its release March 6th, had a 73% decline in revenue its second weekend. This can only be compared to Disney's only other animated box office bomb, The Good Dinosaur, which had a 60% decline in revenue in its second week. This time around, I believe it was the pandemic that cut the legs off of this current animated film, so I do believe it's actually a good movie. We could talk about Sony's Bloodshot.
Let's not even go there.
Yeah, okay. So that was the state of the theatrical distribution in March. However, movies have still been coming out, right, George?
Absolutely, Chris. That sweet digital VOD money is still coming in. That pay-per-view straight to digital releases became a topic of controversy in April when Universal decided not to push the release of DreamWorks' Trolls World Tour and instead made it available to rent digitally for $19.99 for a 48-hour period via almost all digital platforms.
And apparently this play paid big for Universal. In under 3 weeks, Trolls World Tour nearly made $100 million, with Universal taking 80% of the profits. When you compare that to the normal 50-50 to 60-40 split the studio is usually looking at when distributing via theaters, well, if I may quote BoJack Horseman, money, nom, 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 over at Universal. In fact, the haul was so great that Universal CEO Jeff Shell stated, "The results for Trolls World Tour have exceeded our expectations and demonstrated the viability of VOD. As soon as theaters reopen, we expect to release movies on both formats." Soon after that, more of Universal's slate, such as The Hunt, The Invisible Man, and Emma, which all had their theatrical runs cut short, were available for rent digitally.
Okay. That's enough good news. Okay, we need bad news. We need controversy.
Dude, we need those clicks.
And that's where I come in. Only a day later, Adam Aron, CEO of AMC, quite furiously published an open letter to Universal Chairman Donna Langley, absolutely pissed. He announced that going forward, AMC will not license any Universal movies in any of our 1,000 theaters globally on these terms, and hitting his keyboard even harder, he said, "Policy affects any and all Universal movies per se, going into effect today and as our theaters reopen, and is not some hollow, ill-considered threat. Incidentally, this policy is not aimed solely at Universal out of Pique.
Are you looking it up?
Yeah. Oh, Pique.
But what is it?
A feeling of irritation or resentment.
Oh, okay, I guess that's it.
Incidentally, this policy is not aimed solely at Universal out of Pique. Out of Pique. Piquois. He says it also presumes that Universal, in fact, can have its cake and eat it too. The Universal film product can be released to the home audiences and theaters at the same time without modification to the current economic arrangements between us.
If being inside the empty AMC theater on City Walk wasn't awkward enough, I can only imagine how it feels now. While it may be fun to tease Aaron for being a rich man who wants more money, he does have a bit of a point about Universal's seeming attempt to have its cake and eat it too. Back in 1948, the ruling on the landmark case US versus Paramount Pictures broke up and banned vertical integration in Hollywood. The short of that verdict meant that production studios, the means of production, could not also own the means of distribution, theaters. However, that verdict didn't account for what was and is the internet with over-the-top studios, or OTTs. These are studios such as Netflix, Hulu, and Amazon who actually do produce and distribute their own content. With the staggering success of these studios, legacy studios such as Universal get closer to them. What does that have to do with theaters? Well, we'll get to that in a minute, and that's going to be the juicy part. Even with the hot open letter, Universal has yet to retract on Shell's statement in any way.
Since the digital rental release wave started for the last few months, we've been looking at nearly a total cyber box office. If you can even call it that. Sites like The Numbers and Box Office Mojos have even begun to more closely monitor digital sales and rentals. Actual box office numbers aren't readily made available by studios themselves. Exceptions come from situations like Trolls, where Universal has been happy to give us the information. In the meantime, the most concrete metric we have to measure eyeballs are streaming charts.
Yeah, and this is where things get weird. On Netflix, the 5 most streamed films right now are Eurovision Song Contest, The Story of the Fire Saga, 365 Days, Feel the Beat, The Nut Job, and Love. Over at Amazon, the top rentals stack up to be The King of Staten Island, Trolls World Tour, Jumanji: The Next Level, Jungle Beat the Movie, and The Equalizer. As for the iTunes rental charts, Trolls World Tour shows its face again, Terminator Dark Fate, Force of Nature, The Mummy in 2017, and Sonic the Hedgehog. So as you can see, it's largely the Wild West out there as far as content consumption. And the flavor of the month has gone to the flavor of the week, has gone to the flavor of the day, with Warner Brothers' Scoob no longer being at number 1 despite its placing just a few days ago.
Speaking of the Wild West, the brick and mortar box office is even more chaotic. Drive-in theaters have picked up steam in popularity due to it being one of the last means for the theatrical experiences, but with studios holding off really all their films from low budget to large budget, these drive-ins are left with whatever they can get their hands on. Just this past weekend, the top earnings came from Antoine Lee's Follow, distributed by Global View Entertainment, sitting at the weekend gross of $77,609. Becky from Jonathan Mello and Gary Murian grossed $72,776. The Wretched, distributed by IFC and directed by Brett and Drew Pierce, made $39,610. Max Winslow and The House of Secrets made $6,589. Damn. And that's directed by Sean Olsen. And finally, a film that had just its opening weekend, The Transcendents, directed by Derek Ahonen, made $358. It's abysmal out there.
Yeah, it's tough. In order to offset this and prime audiences to the thought of going to theaters, studios have been re-releasing classics in these spaces. For the first time since its release, Jurassic Park reigned once again as king of the box office. The weekend of June 19th to June 21st saw Jurassic Park bring in $517,600, with Jaws right behind it bringing in $516,300.
No, that's so wrong.
$516,300.
Jesus Christ.
Yes, I finished college.
No, you didn't.
A lot of people got their Spielberg double feature on at the drive-in. But hundreds of thousands of dollars at a time is not how this industry works, and it's not how this industry can sustain. And even though VOD is providing relatively decent results for some new releases, creators, studios, and theaters are all desperate for the moment they can reopen. However, that moment is constantly fleeting with the status of COVID-19 cases in flux across the country. Nolan's Tenet had its release date pushed 3 times, from July 17th to July 31st to now August 12th.
Mulan's been also put back.
Got this.
Mulan's been pushed back the same amount of times, back from March 27th to July 24th to August 21st.
Bill and Ted Face the Music, which initially was set to release August 24th, actually moved up its date to August 14th, but is now pushed it back to August 28th.
Yeah, they don't want to deal with Nolan.
Yeah.
Smart move.
I wouldn't want to fight me neither.
Unhinged, starring Russell Crowe, was supposed to come out the 1st of this month, but has now pushed its release to July 31st, meaning we still have at least a month's time to count down to potentially a new theatrical experience.
This has obviously had an effect on movie theater chains, as even though they desperately want to open, they don't want to do so without films that will really put asses in the seats. After these pushed release dates, AMC pushed its reopening date to July 30th, with Cinemark and Regal pushing to July 31st, just in time for Unhinged. All these chains have created social distancing mandates, such as employees wearing masks, more thorough and often theater cleaning between screenings, closing self-condiment stations, cashless purchases, dispersed seating, and the reduction of total theater capacity to 50% or even lower in some cases.
So that's where we're at so far. It's already been a wild ride for the film industry since March, but where might this lead us?
Well, I mean, like most of us, the film industry is living 1 week at a time. I mean, we have prospective opening dates, but at this point, they're really just guesses. The biggest point of analysis here is the studio theater dynamic that is really being put to a strain right now. While both industries need theatrical releases to properly generate revenue, studios have some recourse via video on demand and having a backlog of content. There are ways for them to make money during this quarantine. The theaters, on the other hand, are making no money at all. Their stock prices are plummeting, and the question of their relevance is being brought up. Now, these chains are stuck between a rock and a hard place of either potentially going out of business or opening regardless of the social impacts it could have.
On top of all of that, studios have been gunning for the reversal of the US versus Paramount verdict for years. If the largest theater chain were to go out of business, what's stopping a Disney or Universal from buying the chain if not the law? Imagine Disney operating like Netflix, but with brick and mortar locations, providing El Capitan time 10 experiences across the country, but also being the gatekeeper as to what can get screens in their theaters, assuming they even allow anything other than Disney produced films to ever play.
The month of July is going to be very telling for the fate of film distribution, as we see one whole quarter chalked due to the quarantine. It's going to be really interesting to watch, to say the least, maybe even a little gut-wrenching. Needless to say, the both of us are looking forward to going back to the movies when it's truly safe to do so. So what do you think? Do theaters have a moral obligation to stay closed until we're truly past the pandemic? Do you think they can survive that long? Do you just miss going to the movies? What's your take on all this and the future of filmmaking?
Let us know down in the comments below. I figured that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Let us know down in the comments. We'd be super interested in seeing what you guys have to say about all this. But that's it. For us, we'll be back with more box office news sometime. I don't know.
When we get, we'll see. More than likely, something crazy is going to happen this month. Some CEO is going to wild out. Some chain will try to open regardless, I'm sure. And in that time, we'll monitor what we can, and hopefully we'll see you guys at the top of the month with more news. Till then, stay safe, everyone, and we'll see you next time.